Pella, raised in the Macedonian plain and open to the roots of the north and the Aegean Sea, was much more than a royal residence. It was the center of a kingdom that, in just a few decades, had ceased to be a secondary power to become a machine of war and expansion. It was there that Alexander was born in 356 BC, within a court where everything, banquets, hunts, oaths, marital alliances, was permeated by politics. His father, Philip II, had transformed Macedonia with extraordinary speed. He reorganized the phalanx with the long sarissa, strengthened the cavalry of companions, perfected the use of siege engines, and subdued his neighbors with a mix of diplomacy, coercion, and military prestige. After his victory at Chaeronea in 338 BC, Greece fell under Macedonian hegemony, and Philip was already preparing a campaign against Persia. This was the world that received Alexander, a recently consolidated kingdom, powerful yet still viewed with suspicion by many Greek city-states. His childhood did not unfold in the tranquility of an ornamental court, but in an environment where the nobility was educated to command and to survive. Hunting taught resilience and calculation, war, discipline, oratory, the ability to persuade, and court life, to distrust appearances. In Macedonia, kings depended on the loyalty of the nobles, and that loyalty could easily be broken. The young prince grew up witnessing how power could be gained and lost in a matter of days. Adding to this was the influence of Olympias, his mother, a princess of Epirus, an intense and deeply religious figure, who instilled in her son the conviction that he was destined for something extraordinary. Ancient tradition insisted on rumors of divine origin and favorable omens, elements that cannot be taken literally, but can be seen as part of the mental atmosphere in which Alexander was formed. In a court where legitimacy was constructed as much with arms as with symbols, these ideas held real political value. It is not enough to say he was educated to reign. He was educated to appear exceptional. The decisive education came with Aristotle, whom Philip entrusted with the heir's education around 343 BC in Mieza. There, Alexander did not only learn philosophy, he studied ethics, medicine, zoology, geography, rhetoric, and Greek literature, with special attention to Homer, who provided him with models of heroism, leadership, and glory. Aristotelian teaching did not turn him into a thinker detached from action. It gave him tools to observe, classify, and argue. This blend of culture and ambition left a lasting mark. Later on, Alexander would not only conquer territories, but also seek to understand, name, and organize them. When Philip was assassinated in 336 BC in Aigai, during a public ceremony, Alexander was barely 20 years old. The throne passed to a very young heir in a kingdom armed to the teeth and full of conflicting interests. But he was not an inexperienced boy. He had been trained in the very center of Macedonian power, surrounded by war, intrigue, and symbols of greatness. That is why he was able to react swiftly, secure his position, and present himself not as a usurper, but as the continuer of a work already in progress. It was there that his reign truly began. But that reign still needed to be demonstrated before all. And in Macedonia, authority was not inherited solely by blood. It had to be publicly displayed, with cold blood and a confident demeanor. Ancient tradition then places a decisive scene in which Alexander, still a teenager, reveals something more than audacity. According to Plutarch, during a visit from horsemen and merchants to the court, Philip II observed an extraordinarily valuable but unmanageable horse. The animal reared up, rejected the grooms, and kicked anyone who tried to mount it. It was Bucephalus, head of an ox, for the shape of its skull, or for the dark mark it bore on its forehead. The price was exorbitant, and the king was about to give up on the purchase. It was then that the boy asked to try it. No one expected much from a prince of about 12 or 13 years in front of an animal that had defeated veterans and caretakers. But Alexander did not act out of blind impulse. He approached, observed how the horse became agitated upon seeing its own shadow on the ground, and understood something fundamental. Fear can also be a problem of perception. He turned it towards the sun, calmed it with patience, and only then did he mount it. The gesture combined mastery of the body, psychological intuition, and awareness of the surroundings. It was not mere bravery, it was the ability to read a situation and transform it. Philip, who had watched the scene with growing astonishment, is said to have uttered a famous and oft-repeated phrase: Macedonia was too small for his son, and he ordered him to seek a larger kingdom. The literalness of the quote is debated, as is the case with many anecdotes from antiquity, but its historical significance is clear. The episode functioned as a first public proclamation of exceptionalism. In a court where nobility measured value in hunting, war, and horsemanship, mastering Bucephalus was equivalent to mastering a symbol of aristocratic power. The importance of Bucephalus went far beyond that youthful scene. The horse became Alexander's inseparable companion for years, traversing Asia Minor, Syria, Mesopotamia, and the distant lands of the East. For a warrior king of the 4th century BC, the horse was not merely a means of transportation. It was an extension of the person, a sign of prestige and a tool of war. Alexander and Bucephalus formed an inseparable image of speed, initiative, and command. The legend further reinforced an essential idea of his reign. The sovereign who knows how to guide the beast is also the only one capable of leading armies and peoples. When Bucephalus died during the campaign in India in 326 BC, Alexander reacted with an intensity that reveals the symbolic value of the animal. He founded a city in his honor, Bucephala, in a region near the river Hydaspes. That tribute was not a minor sentimental gesture, but a politics of memory, transforming a personal loss into an imperial foundation. Thus, the horse became part of the map of the conquered world. The anecdote has been repeated for centuries because it condenses the image of Alexander: young, intelligent, capable of mastering what others fear. But it is also wise to read it with caution. The sources were written much later and embellished the episode to present the king as one chosen by fortune. Still, behind the legend lies a historical truth. From an early age, Alexander understood that governing was not just about conquering, but about observing, correcting, and turning every gesture into authority. That ability to transform a gesture into authority became even more evident when Alexander left behind the Macedonian sphere and entered a much more complex world, where ruling also meant learning to speak the language of the gods. After taking Egypt in 332 BC, with hardly any resistance, he was received as a liberator against Persian dominance. But Egypt was not just another province. It was an ancient civilization, with powerful priesthoods, temples, its own calendars, and a very precise idea of royal legitimacy. There, in 331 BC, Alexander ventured into the desert to the oasis of Siwa to consult the famous oracle of Ammon. The journey itself had political value. Siwa was far from the usual routes in an isolated and difficult region, making the pilgrimage a test of prestige and determination. Ancient sources recount the encounter as if the god had greeted Alexander in an exceptional manner. Over time, this scene fueled the narrative that the king was recognized as the son of Ammon Zeus. There is no certainty about the exact words of the oracle, and it is very likely that the account was amplified by later propaganda, but its impact was real. In Egypt, linking himself with Ammon reinforced his acceptance among the priests and the local population. In the Greek world, the association with Zeus elevated his figure above that of any ordinary monarch. It does not matter whether Alexander literally believed in that affiliation. What is decisive is that he knew how to convert religious ambiguity into political capital. This use of symbols was not an isolated whim, but part of a broader way of governing. Alexander founded or refounded cities at various points in the empire, many of which bore his name. The most famous was Alexandria in Egypt, laid out in a strategic location between the delta and the sea, with access to trade routes and a privileged defensive position. But it was not the only one. There were Alexandrias in Asia Minor, Syria, Persia, Bactria, and other conquered regions. These foundations were not mere gestures of imperial vanity. They served to secure roads, control passes, sustain garrisons, and settle groups of veterans loyal to the king. Each city functioned as a piece of a larger system. There, troops could be concentrated, resources stored, taxes organized, and Greek customs of urban life disseminated. The agora, the gymnasiums, civic institutions, the administrative language. However, these were not empty cities built on ruins without memory. Many occupied pre-existing settlements, reorganizing local populations and modifying ancient social balances. Alexander's expansion mixed integration and domination. It created spaces for cultural contact, but also imposed new hierarchies. That is why Siwa and the Alexandrias form a single story. In one case, Alexander learned that religion could legitimize his power. In the other, he understood that the conquered territory had to be administered, named, and fixed in the landscape. He did not conquer only with spears and sieges. He also did so with rituals, urban foundations, and a precise awareness that an empire needs symbols as much as armies. But when power extends to the borders of the known world, the politics of symbols are no longer enough. One must also measure the resilience of men and geography. After traversing Central Asia and entering the northwest of the Indian subcontinent, Alexander encountered a very different landscape from the Mediterranean or Persia. There, the speed of cavalry and the prestige of the conquering king were not sufficient. There were heavy rains, swollen rivers, jungles, immense distances, and armies fighting with resources adapted to the terrain. In 326 BC, upon reaching the Hydaspes, now the Jhelum River, he faced one of the toughest tests of his entire career. The enemy was King Porus, the sovereign of the region, a monarch who ruled over a land accustomed to war and river defense. The Hydaspes was no minor obstacle. Its flow increased with the monsoon, its banks were treacherous, and the Indian army guarded the possible crossings. Alexander understood that a frontal assault would be suicidal. Therefore, he resorted to his preferred method: deception, mobility, and quick decision-making. For days, he conducted distraction maneuvers in front of the river while searching for a crossing point further upstream. Finally, taking advantage of the night and bad weather, he crossed with part of his troops and forced Porus to react under unfavorable conditions. The battle was fierce. Porus's army had infantry, cavalry, and above all, war elephants. Animals that could disrupt the Macedonian lines and sow panic among horses and soldiers. The phalanx, armed with long sarissas, barely withstood the clash. Alexander's cavalry sought to envelop the flanks and break the enemy's order. Victory came, but at a high price. Ancient sources emphasize that this campaign did not have the clean brilliance of other famous battles. It was a war of attrition, fought under rain, mud, and fatigue, at a time when the army was already showing signs of exhaustion after years of continuous marching. And yet, the most revealing moment occurred after the victory. Porus, defeated, was brought before Alexander. The conqueror could have humiliated him like so many other vanquished foes. He did not. According to tradition, he asked him how he wished to be treated, and Porus responded with a memorable phrase, "Like a king." That exchange encapsulated a much more sophisticated policy than mere destruction. Alexander understood that stable dominance did not arise solely from fear, but also from recognition. Keeping Porus in his position as an ally or vassal allowed for controlling the region with less friction and leveraging the existing local authority. That gesture had enormous strategic importance. In India, where the logistical distance from Macedonia was vast, and where the army was beginning to question how far to continue, Alexander needed to turn enemies into collaborators. He could not always do so, but the case of Porus illustrates one of the keys to his governing style: integrating defeated elites rather than erasing them completely. That imperial logic was not sentimental, it was practical. Governing such a vast territory required administrators, intermediaries, and subordinate kings. The Hydaspes was, therefore, more than a military victory. It marked the limit of an expansion that had always pushed the will of a single man further. It also demonstrated that Alexander was capable of admiring his adversary and turning another's defeat into political stability. But the effort had been immense, and the physical and human cost was beginning to become visible. This combination of audacity, respect, and exhaustion heralds the real price of an empire built on the fly. But even the men who conquer foreign kings begin to lose control when their own court changes its face. In the regions of Central Asia, far from Macedonia and the Greek world, Alexander had surrounded himself with Persians, Bactrians, and Sogdian people, incorporating ceremonies, clothing, and governance practices characteristic of an imperial monarchy much larger than the Macedonian tradition. This process was not accepted by all. For many of his comrades in arms, shaped by the roughness of Philip II's court, the new Eastern pomp seemed a betrayal of the old loyalty between king and nobles. In 328 BC, in Maracanda, present-day Samarkand, that tension erupted at a banquet. There was Cleitus the Black, a veteran Macedonian, a man of the old guard, and one of those who had fought closest to the king. He was not an opportunistic courtier. He had saved Alexander's life at the Battle of Granicus years earlier, when the Asian campaign was just beginning. Cleitus represented a generation that had accompanied the young heir from the start and still saw itself as the custodian of an almost personal relationship with the sovereign. But in Maracanda, that relationship was already broken. The banquet, like so many in antiquity, was more than a meal. It was a political space. There, favors, hierarchies, and memories were contested. The conversation turned to the merit of Philip II and the traditional Macedonians versus the new court that Alexander was building. Cleitus defended the old companions and criticized the way the king, in his view, had distanced himself from Macedonian customs to adopt increasingly Persian royal ways. In a court where alcohol and debate could become weapons, intoxication did the rest. Alexander responded with anger. The argument escalated, and it ended with the king killing Cleitus with his own spear or sword. The episode was devastating because it touched several nerves at once. It was not just an impulsive murder. It was the clash between two models of power. The first, the Macedonian, still demanded familiarity, frankness, and a certain equality between king and comrades in arms. The second, the one Alexander was forging, relied on distance, ceremony, and absolute obedience. Cleitus spoke as an ancient noble. Alexander reacted as a monarch who no longer tolerated being corrected. The court had ceased to be a circle of equals and had become a hierarchical structure sustained by fear and glory. What came next is almost as important as the crime. Ancient sources emphasize that Alexander fell into a deep crisis of remorse. He refused to eat, wept for his act, and locked himself in painful introspection. Beyond the literary nuances, the scene reveals something decisive. The conqueror was not a machine of victory, but a man subjected to extreme pressures, to the loneliness of command, and to the fragility of an authority that demanded constant triumph, even over himself. In Maracanda, imperial violence ceased to be directed solely outward. It turned against the king's own Macedonian memory. Since then, Alexander's figure has been marked by a contradiction difficult to separate, a unifier of worlds, and at the same time, a destroyer of personal bonds. Cleitus's death showed everyone that closeness to the king no longer guaranteed safety. And in that warning lies the true human cost of absolute power. That cost became definitive in Babylon in 323 BC, when Alexander died at just 32 years old. His end remains shrouded in uncertainty. Some ancient authors spoke of sudden fever, others of malaria, typhus, infection, or even possible poisoning. The historical truth is that the empire lost its only center of gravity at the exact moment it depended on him the most. There was no adult heir capable of taking command, and the political structure hastily created by the conquests lacked stable mechanisms for succession. Babylon was not just any place. It was a symbolic capital of the Mesopotamian world, a crossroads of roots, a storehouse of resources, and a stage where Persian power had demonstrated its ability to organize vast territories for centuries. There ended the march of a king who had led his army from Macedonia to the edge of India. And there began another story, that of fragmentation. His generals, the Diadochi, fought over the legacy and ended up dividing it into several kingdoms. In Egypt, the Ptolemaic dynasty prevailed. In Asia, the Seleucid power emerged. Macedonia fell into the hands of the Antigonids. The dream of unity dissolved, but the world that Alexander had created did not disappear. From that rupture, the Hellenistic world was born. The Greek language, no longer just the language of a local elite, but as a tool for administration, commerce, and culture, spread from the eastern Mediterranean to vast areas of Asia. Cities founded or reorganized by the Macedonians became nodes for the exchange of soldiers, artisans, officials, philosophers, and merchants. Local traditions were not erased, but rather reordered within a new political ecology, where Greek culture mixed with Egyptian, Persian, Syrian, and Central Asian influences. This process lasted for centuries and forever changed the history of the Mediterranean and the Near East. The 5 anecdotes that accompany this journey clearly reveal the true scope of Alexander. Bucephalus showed a teenager capable of observing, understanding, and mastering what others feared. Siwa revealed a king who knew how to use religion as a tool of legitimization in a multicultural world. The Alexandrias teach that to conquer also meant to found, administer, and establish power in the territory. The Hydaspes demonstrated his ability to adapt warfare to extreme conditions and to turn an enemy into an ally. And the death of Cletus exposed the darkest side of his greatness: internal violence, moral fragility, and the unbearable tension of absolute authority. The sources we rely on to reconstruct this, Arrian, Plutarch, Diodorus Siculus, Curtius Rufus, and Justin, wrote long after the events with literary, moral, or compendious interests. Therefore, Alexander appears simultaneously as a strategist, hero, founder, deified king, and a man overwhelmed by his own ambition. History and legend became intertwined because his figure was, from very early on, a subject of memory and propaganda. His importance lies not only in the battles he won, but in the world he left behind, a more connected, more mixed space, and one more aware that imperial power needed armies, symbols, cities, and narratives. Alexander did not just conquer territories, he altered the way dominion was imagined in the ancient world.